Hello and welcome back to any of you who have watched my previous video on how to make these simple, affordable wire and tube remote controls for your model railway layout. As you can see, I've made a little more progress on what will ultimately become a little freelance switching shelf layout in the tradition of the late great Alan Wright's Inglenook shunting puzzle, itself based on the real-life Killam sidings in Northumberland, England that were constructed and first operated by the Northeastern Railway. And in keeping with the big picture goal of replicating a small freight yard where I can easily shuffle wagons around and form various little consists to my heart's content, for today's video, I'm going to go over my method for how to turn these effectively obsolete track pieces that are currently quite easy to acquire at bargain prices because nobody in the world but me seems to want or have any use for them, and turn them into versatile manual uncoupler units, like the one shown here, that can be remotely operated using the same cheap and cheerful wire and tube controls that were the subject of my last tutorial. And relating this back to the broader theme of this channel, to anyone watching who is perhaps unsure of how to begin the process of transitioning what they have from a train set into a proper model railway, I think that incorporating one or more of these can be an excellent way to easily and inexpensively add a ton of play value and visual interest to even the smallest of layouts by facilitating remotely controlled yard switching operations that closely mirror their real-world counterpart. Even something as simple as being able to simulate dropping off a livestock van at an industrial siding for unloading, then driving off with the locomotive to perform other tasks, and coming back again later to retrieve the empty wagon captures the essential appeal of running a realistic operating session and is made all the more immersive and enjoyable by the inclusion of seamless remote uncoupling. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around and I'll show you how to do it. So the main product at the heart of this project is the Atlas No. 49 HO scale dead-end uncoupler, which in my experience can be easily found at train shows and on eBay for between $1 and $4 a piece, depending on condition, what the rails are made of, whether or not you have to pay shipping and stuff like that. But in any case, I really think within that range, they are quite a good deal. That said, as designed, they do of course have a couple of characteristics that help explain why they're so easy to come by in great numbers at these kind of prices. Those being namely that A, they're constructed such that the center ramp is always in the up position by default, with no provision for lowering it if you want to be able to pass something over it in both directions and without uncoupling or derailing it. And B, they only really work out of the box with the old school XF2 horn hook couplers, which are effectively considered obsolete by most of the hobby. Fortunately, however, it is an extremely simple and straightforward process to adapt these inexpensive uncouplers to instead provide the layout operator with the option to toggle them on and off at will using the same wire and tube remote controls that I covered in my last video, as well as to optionally convert the ramp to seamlessly operate a number of different coupler types instead of the horn hooks it was originally designed for, to include the UK standard hook and loop, mainland European standard D-link, or even the current US standard knuckle couplers, the respective processes for which I plan to cover in my next video. But whether you intend to leave the ramp itself unmodified and use it with the horn hook couplers, or adapt it for use with different ones, the steps for making it possible to lower out of the way or raise into position from a remote location on command are exactly the same in both cases, so I'm going to go over those first. Once you have your dead-end uncoupler in hand, start by identifying the center point of the white plastic ramp, marking it, and then drilling a 3/64 inch hole from above, going all the way through both the ramp itself and the black plastic faux roadbed section directly underneath it. I'm using this super simple manual hobby drill available on Amazon along with a generous amount of small drill bits for around the $10 mark, but the plastic on this is so soft that if you already had the correct size drill bit on hand for an electric drill, you could probably do this just by twirling that between your thumb and index finger for long enough and in the correct direction. But no matter how you do it, once you have that first hole drilled, the next step is to flip the track piece over and using what you just drilled as a center pilot, enlarge the hole in the bottom of the black plastic faux roadbed to a diameter of 1/4 of an inch or so, being careful not to drill any further than the other side of that one layer of black plastic. At this point, you can set the track piece aside for a moment in favor of an office staple and a set of needle nose pliers, which you will use to fashion that staple into a shape like this. The only important dimension is this short vertical doubled over middle segment here, which needs to measure less than 1/8 of an inch long so that when you insert it from above into the hole that you just drilled in the uncoupling ramp, it doesn't protrude beyond the bottom of the faux roadbed section underneath, even when the ramp is fully depressed. This is to make sure the ramp will be able to move through its full range of motion when the track is placed on top of a flat and level surface on your layout. However, before you do actually place the bent staple into the hole, you will first need to cut at least 6 inches of fishing line, tie one end into a slip knot, and then fasten it around the inside of the 180-degree bend at the bottom of this staple's doubled over middle section like so. Once you've done that, you can now feed the leading end of the fishing line from above through the hole in the uncoupler ramp and pull it through gently until the short, doubled over staple section is fully seated such that the longer arms, perpendicular to it on either side, are resting flush against the bottom of the middle trough molded into the surface of the uncoupler ramp itself. Next, turn the uncoupler over and tie another slip knot, this time such that when the closure is fastened tightly around a toothpick or similarly small diameter former, the leading end protruding from the underside of the track is short enough that when the ramp is fully depressed, the loop cannot reach beyond the edge of the plastic faux roadbed. The last step before connecting this loop to one end of a wire and tube assembly, like the one from my last video, is to take a needle file or knife and carve out a small groove that both bisects the hole in the underside of the track piece and runs parallel to the layout edge from which the uncoupler will be operated, while being just wide and deep enough to accommodate a straightened out bit of staple wire. After this groove has been fashioned, glue just such a piece of straightened out staple wire in place within it, making sure that the wire is positioned between the fishing line and the layout edge from which the uncoupler will be operated, such that it can act as a rudimentary fixed guide, redirecting the string at a 90-degree angle. Now, all that's left to do is remove your toothpick placeholder from the remaining tail of fishing line, replace it with one end of whatever material you're using as the wire in your wire and tube assembly, and then bend that wire back and over itself to form a closed loop that will keep the slip knot in the fishing line from sliding off and disconnecting. From that point onward, everything about feeding the wire through an appropriately sized length of tubing mounted to the surface of your layout and affixing a handle to the opposite end can be accomplished by following exactly the same process I detailed in my last video. Finally, use whatever method you prefer to secure the straight section of track housing your uncoupler into place on top of your layout surface, and you're done. As illustrated here, at this point, pulling on the handle should lower the ramp out of the way of any locomotives and rolling stock passing over it, while pushing on the handle should allow it to return to the raised position, thus enabling targeted, intentional uncoupling to occur only when you want it to. Well, I think that's all for today, but thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing, and checking back often for new model railway content to include other tutorials, reviews of budget-friendly locomotives, rolling stock and accessories, introductions to other free and low-cost online resources, and more. And of course, if there are any other topics you'd like to see me cover here, please leave a comment below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks.